This packing event came at a busy time in this congregation. My usual suspects on the vestry were busy. Our volunteers who have trucks were all either out of town or their trucks were not available. And it's just a sleepy time in the church year. But it's a hugely needy time in the lives of very hungry, hot, impoverished migrant workers, and so we carried on. Yesterday morning, early, I arrive here with the second half of the food to see with my delight, not the 2 people I'd expected, but like crowds of people here to help me. This is wonderful. However, I'm doing my best to ignore the voice in my head telling me it's a mistake to have rented a van to haul the food. But that was my only plan, because otherwise, how are we going to do this? And just as I am thinking that we are almost finished, that we are almost there, that we are going to pull this off and get the food there, Adam calls me and he says, we got to get creative. The rental car agency has rented the van we reserved out from under us. Oh, so then he says, we're going to make this happen. I said, okay. I made that announcement, we kept working. But immediately people started telling me that they could take carloads of food in their cars. People called other people. Mary called a Perva. Ann volunteered to go to Hillsborough with a load and come back with her truck if we needed it. Adam brought this beautiful truck. Naomi and Avi and everybody else hauled 150 bags outside, loaded them up, took them to Hillsborough, and delivered them on time. The day was saved. I'm not telling you these stories because I compare myself or ourselves to Elisha or to Jesus. I'm telling you these stories because I think they are about having faith, having love, and practicing community as a way of living gospel. The readings concern themselves with miracles worked by Elisha and by Jesus for people who were clearly deeply in need to find something to eat, and by Jesus for his frightened disciples. Elisha was a prophet to the people and kings of Judah in the 9th century before Christ. During his time, his people were beset by war and famine and recession. And Elisha did perform many, many helpful miracles, and he did so because he was elected by his predecessor Elijah, who nominated Elisha as his successor and gave him, you remember, a double measure of his spirit before Elijah was taken up in a fiery whirlwind in his chariot. It's a very linear construct. God gives the power to Elijah. Elijah gives an enhanced measure of the power to Elisha. And Elisha uses it very well with everyone because he believes that he is working with God's power on God's plan. The feeding of the 5,000 in the gospel is more than familiar to all of us. I don't have to tell you that Jesus here is enacting his option for the poor and the oppressed. Hidden in this story, though, is a sentence which reveals the real message here. The evangelist says, when Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Of course, it makes sense that a marginalized, oppressed group of people who find somebody who can cure their illnesses and feed them want to put him into a position in which he can always do that. But lurking right below that wish to be fed and to be cured is a wish to have a king who protects, defends, and avenges them on their oppressors. Because oppressed people have grave difficulty believing that they can make good things happen. Their experience is otherwise. But monarchy has almost never worked for the poor and the marginalized. Because the monarch says, I will decide who gets what and how much and when. So the wealthy become wealthier and the poor begin to die faster and earlier. Monarchy is always wealthy and always deeply attached to the myth of scarcity, which says only the monarch, think about Pharaoh, only the monarch can shore up enough supplies to ensure survival, and that the poor, who are the only people who will do this, must not only produce the supplies, they must be taxed, overworked, and underserved. Jesus came to demonstrate a radically different paradigm. He says, I will draw all people unto myself, by which we are to understand that we are all deeply and irrevocably connected to each other through Jesus. We don't work the way Elisha thought we worked, as individuals with individual contracts with God, but through and with and in each other and in Jesus. Which means, of course, that every voice counts, that everyone has a piece of the truth. So, are these readings just telling us to share more? Well, kind of, but I think that it's more profound than that. I think that we are urged to open ourselves to the enormous possibilities of community, and that we are asked to open ourselves at the very point at which we are sure there is no solution, to not give up. We are asked to allow ourselves to be transformed by the needs, the desires, and the opinions of other people, especially those people we avoid. Something happens when we stop believing that there is not enough, that our problems are too complicated, that the world is too hopeless. Something happens when we open our hearts and our minds to each other. Something that is holy, is deeply sacred, utterly life-giving. And it has a cumulative effect. The more you do it, the more you do it. We in the United States are in a pivotal moment. We are entrenched in a life and death discussion about how we will govern ourselves. Will we cede our power, our diversity, our rich multinational, multicultural identity and heritage to a governmental machine which arrogates all power to itself, protecting its wealth, silencing dissenting voices, quashing any check and balance? Or will we uphold our tarnished but still vital belief in the inherent right of each person to speak, and in the need of our community to hear from every constituent part to uphold the common good? I hear in these readings the invitation to hold fast to the power of community, of a community rooted and grounded in love, as Paul says. So when those kids ate my wonderful tenderloin with a pork wine reduction, I didn't have time to go around and see what was happening because I was too busy putting food on the table. But later, even a year later, I heard bits and pieces. Everybody thought that maybe that's what they needed, those kids. They were growing. Everybody ate something else. Everybody shared anything anybody else wanted. Nobody was unhappy. And although this is not a story about people who were starving to begin with, it is what happens when you believe that hope lives in community and lights up when your heart opens to it.